I want to give an update on the incident that occurred on July 4th on 4th Street involving the arrest that has been much broadcast on media and social media. Give an update on the incident and then where we're at with it right now. As a reminder, this incident occurred on July 4th at approximately 1:25 in the morning when Austin police officers were dispatched to the Rain nightclub on a disturbance. The complainant called and said that there was a male that was there that was threatening both him and staff members. He gave a description of the suspect and stated that he had a knife that was on his waist and that he was possibly intoxicated or on drugs. The complainant advised that the suspect had been physical with the staff, but that he was no longer being physical with them. When officers arrived on scene, they met with the complainant, who immediately again advised that the suspect had a knife on him, that it was attached to the front of his belt, and that he had been very aggressive with them. Officers recognized the suspect standing a little further down on 4th Street from where the entrance to the club was, and as they approached, another employee that was outside warned the officers again that the suspect did in fact have a knife on his belt. The officers moved in towards the suspect in an attempt to talk with him and detain him for an investigation of the incident that had occurred, and recognized that he appeared to be involved in some type of a verbal altercation with a female that was present. Based on the reported conduct that the officers understood at that time, the fact that the suspect was armed with a deadly weapon and appeared to be involved in a verbal disturbance with a female as they approached, the officers determined that they wanted to detain him and handcuff him for their safety while they interviewed him and determined what happened in this instance. As the officers attempted to detain him, he immediately began to resist their efforts, pulling his arms away from them as they tried to pull his arms behind his back. The officers ultimately decided to take the suspect to the ground to get better positioning and again attempt to take him into custody. Once on the ground, the suspect again continued to try and pull his hands towards his front, and reportedly in a downward direction, the officers felt he was pulling down towards his waist, again where that knife was secured on his waist. This is around the time when the video that has been posted on social media and displayed in the media kind of picks up. And so what happens at that point, as you can see, is the struggle. The officer that is actually towards the suspect's feet pulled his taser out in an attempt to gain control over this individual and take him into custody. He removed the cartridge given how close he was and did what is called a drive stun application, where you place the taser on the individual and you deploy it at that point, and it gives a shock, again in an attempt to gain control over the individual. The officer stated that at that point the suspect grabbed a hold of his taser as he was trying to use it, and that's when he began striking the suspect that is evidenced in that video. It is clear at some point that the officer that's towards the head is able to get the suspect's hand free of that and has both hands under control in his arms, again trying to get them behind his back. And then again the video displays where they finally are able to roll over the suspect and get him placed in handcuffs. It's also evidenced on the video the female that ultimately was arrested for interfering with the duties of a public servant, how frequently she was interfering with these officers' attempts as they tried to carry out their duties. So what we have so far is, on the initial review, we've got a witness now that has given a statement, and he stated that as the officers approached the suspect initially, he did in fact reach for his knife as the officers got there and were able to get their hands on him. Again, who has been identified as Justin Grant. He was charged that night with terroristic threat, and that charge is based on conduct that took place at the nightclub prior to the video that has been well depicted. In that, he grabbed a hold of a nightclub employee who was denying him entry into the club, reportedly grabbing a hold of him tightly, pulling his face close to him, and telling him to let him in the bar or something bad was going to happen, as he motioned towards the knife that he had secured on his waist. So for that, he was charged with terroristic threat. He was charged with resisting arrest, and then he was also charged with possession of a controlled substance because upon search incidental to his arrest, he was found to have a substance that tested positive for methamphetamine in his wallet. The female that was involved in this incident, who has been identified as Alexandria Green, was arrested also for interfering with the duties of the police officer trying to effect the arrest. We, at this point, have done an initial review through the chain of command, and we are going to initiate an administrative inquiry into this incident. And this is something that we do in incidences that have arisen to the level where there is either great public interest or we just need to look deeper into what happened. What we know is that there were many witnesses to this incident, as can be seen on the video, but we don't know who they are, and we're asking that if you are one of those witnesses that you come forward and identify yourself to us so that we can take your statement as well. And it's also obvious that there's at least one person that has a cell phone and is videotaping this as well, although he comes into the frame towards the very end of the video that we have. Both of these officers were wearing body-worn cameras. However, one of the officers was knocked off of his uniform as soon as the struggle began, and during the struggle, one of the other officers' cameras stopped recording. So those will be something that we will be looking at as well, but this is why we're asking anyone who may have additional video footage to please bring that to us so we can include that in our continuing review into this incident.